Hellboy.
Ooh, Hellboy. Last night, DJ and I had the pleasure of going to a small little theater in Los Angeles, California, to see the 2019 adaptation of Mike Mignola's Hellboy. And howdy, do we have a review for you. And not just that, we're diving into everything that makes this one stand out against the other two Hellboy movies.
Yes,
there's been quite a collection of Hellboy movies.
Surprisingly,
so
for like a kind of a lesser known character.
Yeah.
Those other two movies were directed by Guillermo del Toro. Heard of him?
Yeah.
Oscar winner.
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro.
Big friend of Doug Jones. Doug Jones.
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, my favorite
who
guy.
Sounds like he could be a superhero in the Hellboy universe.
Doug Jones. Oh my God, he'd be great. I would read that comic and I'd see that movie. But yes, we're going to be coming at you right now with a spoiler-free review, so buckle up. So, this new Hellboy 2019, click,
is not directed by Guillermo del Toro.
It is not. And we'll get to that, how I feel about that later. But it is directed by Neil Marshall. Now, where's Neil Marshall come from?
Neil Marshall is probably best known to the most audiences. He directed two of the big battle episodes of Game of Thrones, the Battle of Blackwater and the Battle of the Wall, those episodes. He also did episodes of Hannibal, which is a show I highly recommend.
Nice.
And he also directed The Descent, which I know is widely beloved within the horror community.
And Dog Soldier.
Yes, that is not as beloved.
Wait, sorry, you said Descent first.
Yeah, but he did direct it.
It's on the top of his IMDb. I had to mention it. I just found out about it.
Yeah.
But it's also written by Andrew Cosby, and of course, Mike Mignola has a writing credit because he's the creator and the artist behind Hellboy. And this stars David Harbour, Mila Jovovich, Ian McShane, Daniel Day Kim, and Sasha Lane. Here's your quickie synopsis. Based on the graphic novel by Mike Mignola, Hellboy, caught between the worlds of the supernatural and human, battle an ancient sorceress bent on revenge. Now, this movie's hitting theaters April 12th, 2019, and as of recording, there ain't no Rotten Tomatoes scores, boys and girls.
Nothing yet, which is pretty cool. Out there, if you had to guess.
Pretty cool for us, meaning that we get to have our review out at the same time as everybody else, as all the other boys and girls.
So if you had to guess what you think the Rotten Tomatoes score will be.
By the beginning, in the first couple minutes of this movie, I was like, I could see it sitting at a pretty 80%.
Yes.
Maybe a 75, but I would think that maybe it deserved a point or two more. And then 5 minutes were gone, and then there were 2 hours following that. Actually, it's just about 2 hours.
Yeah, it's right at 2 hours, which I thank you for that.
Yeah.
I feel like more movies should that's fine.
If I'm trying to think of how Rotten Tomatoes usually goes with movies like this, I could see it sitting around, honestly, with all the aggregated scores and everything, 50%.
Yeah.
I think that's where it's going to sit.
Or lower, because with Rotten Tomatoes, it's all or nothing. It really doesn't do it's fine. It's either like the worst movie ever, it's the best movie ever. Like the way those scores get aggregated, it can be confusing.
I could see that. So we have our overall thoughts, and we're also going to dive into what makes this awesome, what makes Hellboy awesome, and a couple other topics as we work our way through this review.
Yes.
But overall, walking out of the theater, DJ,
what
were you thinking? What were you feeling?
Well, I think our audience laughed a lot. And it wasn't always at things that you could tell the movie wanted them to laugh at. No, I think this movie has a exceptionally high bar to clear because Guillermo del Toro is a widely beloved filmmaker, and he got to put his stamp on these movies first. And they decided to take it in understandably, they decided to take it in another direction. They're like, hey, let's try and make it bloody and gory and maybe for a little less money, and see if we can have like a Deadpool style hit on our hands. And I'm not sure that they do.
I agree with that. In the beginning, we were starting to get some. You before we started recording, you kind of equated some of the humor and the violence to like an Evil Dead.
Yeah,
kind of
like there's it flirts with this idea of like doing like this gonzo over the top horror comedy type thing,
like B movie.
Yeah, and when it leans into that, I think it works. But then there's other times where it doesn't feel like it's in on the joke.
I don't think it is. Because in the beginning, it feels like, in the very beginning, you get a classic, like, let's set up who the villain is. And this is the MacGuffins that you'll need to either stop or she will get those and be bad. You know, like classic. Every movie, period, does that. Every single one, even the crime thrillers. No, they we open with that. It's got kind of a humor to it where it's like, oh, it's over the top.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how the rest of the movie will be. And it's not. The quick answer is no, it's not. This movie, while Guillermo del Toro just kind of felt like you're looking in at a fantastical world of like fairy tale creatures come to life, or like kind of the darker, grim stories that we like that some people read as kids or have been adapted in other ways. Like here's your kind of like dark and twisted gothic horror romantic view of them.
Yeah.
that's what Guillermo's movies felt like, and that's what he wanted it to feel like, and that's what made it really cool for me. Is that like there's like you have all of that, but there's a police force in there too that has to try to keep them hidden from people, and I like that aspect. Even if you took out the fact that humans didn't know about it, or if they did know about it, doesn't matter. The aspect of that world is really cool. And now in this, instead of doing like the gothic romantic thing, they lean more into the comic books. So like, well, the comic book fans are going to get everything they want out of this, and I know Hellboy's popular, but I don't think he's that popular as a character when it comes to supporting characters and main storylines, especially when it came towards the end of his run. That's not to knock that, hey, Hellboy fans, you deserve getting to see whatever you want to see on the big screen. But as someone who's casually watched the 2 movies and read a few comics in between, this movie, I'll just come out and say it shoves as much Hellboy lore in terms of villains, side characters, storylines into this movie as possible, and it really drags the movie down.
I think a lot of, specifically Marvel Studios, have done a good job of learning what to streamline and when to streamline. In this, I was like, wow, this feels like you just put in a whole comic arc, and it turns out I was looking into it. It's like it's three separate comic arcs that of Hellboy that they throw in there, and it's a lot, and the movie moves a lot, and it's cut very. I would describe it as haphazard. It makes it feel like maybe there was a significantly longer cut, and they wanted it to get to 2 hours, but they didn't want to cut anything out, so they just cut everything tighter. It was like a producer saw the way Suicide Squad was edited and was like, yeah, but I want more of it. I want it even choppier. Like I want it even less coherent than this.
I'd say when it comes to positives for this movie, David Harbour is. I really like his portrayal.
He's having a lot of fun as Hellboy.
I would say not to like knock down a positive I just had.
Yeah.
I feel like Ron Perlman's. As soon as he comes on screen, he's really burned into your brain of who this person is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I fully get who David Harbour is, besides one point of view that he has about the world and where
as
he
Hellboy,
fits into
like
it.
his take on Hellboy.
Yeah, I don't think I really get anything from him, but I still think he does a good job as a performer.
Yeah.
And so I want to give that. And also, you're going to say this too. We think we both agree. Ian McShane. I don't even know if I don't know what his character's name is. I do know now it's Professor Broom. But I don't think that matters. His performance in anything is always just like something about it. It's nice. It's like having chocolate all the time. It's like, I don't really care if there's chocolate in this treat. I'm going to like it. So if Ian McShane's in this movie, regardless of what it is, I'm going to like him.
Yeah, I'm convinced that you could give Ian McShane anything and he'd be able to deliver it in a way that it's like, oh, that works.
Yeah.
That works because he's given a lot to say. And for the most part, he really makes it work. There's one specific scene at the end where he's giving a speech. And a lot about the scene around him does not work, but his delivery really works, and he's so talented. But I'd also like to say the cast overall: Daniel Day Kim gives a really solid performance. The movie around them, I think, struggles, but the whole cast, I thought, really brought it. And then also, I think you'd agree with this: some of the creature designs are cool.
Yes, I think. I'd agree. There is one main antagonist that I think they've hid mostly from the trailer. So
I don't think she's been in the trailers. But I don't think she has. So I think
I know who we're talking about. There is one specific person from fairy tale lore.
And is a big Hellboy antagonist from the comics.
And they're also, if you guys read Fables, they're a very big character in that, which is very fun. And they really, it's a German fairy tale that's meant to scare kids, but they fully lean into all of the weird fairy tale things, and that's really cool. In the context of the movie, it's basically pointless. The entire encounter and what she does on screen. But regardless, very cool. Mm-hmm. There's one main henchman that I personally really like, mainly because they give him a Scottish accent. I like he's just cursing and swearing and like being violent and stuff. I'm like, overall, I enjoy what he brings. Oh, but when it comes to CGI and character design, like that's cool. But the way they execute some of it, you can see where the budget stops.
Yeah, and it's crazy how much they decided to do, considering that the budget was limited.
Also, maybe it wasn't that limited, but there are an amazing amount of locations that they go to in this. A lot of big locations, a lot of scenes where it goes, we show up here, we have a 5-minute conversation, and then another strange person, another character that's introduced is like, hey, you got to go over here to talk to this person. As soon as they get there, another 5-minute scene is like, no, actually you need to go over here. They go everywhere.
There's also, you mentioned, there's also a lot of expositional introductions,
Oh, yeah.
specifically with Mila Jovovich.
Mila Jovovich.
Mila Jovovich. I always pronounce it wrong. They do the classic. They did this in Tom Cruise's The Mummy 2.
Shout out.
Where there's a legitimate organic exposition scene where a character that doesn't know in the movie, it's about halfway through the movie, is like, hey, who is this? Which you would ask that, and somebody explains it. And it definitely feels like a producer note. They're like, no, they're not going to get it. Put it at the beginning too, so you get the same exposition story twice in the movie. It's like it's not that complicated. We get it. But all of that said, how would you rate this movie?
I do want to mention one more thing before we get there.
Yeah.
I like crazy, fantastical lore, but the way that it's doled out in this movie, you mentioned exposition. I just want to build off that really quick. Every character does exposition, even Hellboy at points. There's no one person's job. Like the more recent Star Treks, they do a good job of doling out exposition. Like in, I think it's the second movie, someone gets stung by something, and so their hand's like blowing up. And while they're doing it and they're getting treated, and it's like things are moving really fast, and there's pieces moving everywhere. So you're really interested. You are being taught something at the same time about basically one of the main key plot points of the movie, and that was really well done, and I enjoyed it. In this,
Game of Thrones used to do in the early seasons by having characters having sex during the exposition. That was it's
a good way to keep people's attention. But in this movie, we will go and do a plot point. And we're like, the first main antagonist of the movie, we're going to go deal with them, and there's this whole group of people we're going to meet that has to deal with this thing. And then when they get there, Hellboy notices a picture, and he's like, what is this? I think I know it. I've got a couple questions. What feels like we go on a tangent for about 20 minutes to explain. We get Hellboy's origin again. We get Dad's origin. We get his friends. We get this and we get this. We get a real deep cut to a character played by Thomas Hayden Church. I think we can mention that because he was in the press.
He was in the press, but in case it's a spoiler, he does play a classic character from the comics, which for me does pay off into a pretty solid joke significantly later in the movie.
In the post-credit scene, there are 3 post-credit scenes.
Two? Yeah, there's 2.
Felt like 3.
Yeah,
felt like 3.
There's 2 post-credit scenes in this movie.
They will go on these like long tangents of exposition for a specific character, introducing a lot of new things, and then we'll wind back to the story, and we're like, that didn't really matter. This didn't actually. One didn't answer the question that was the proposed, and then at the end you're like, whoa. I know I tell stories that way sometimes, where I get lost on information, little bits that I find interesting, but also I didn't answer anything that someone asked of me. That movie does it a lot. Winding it back, though, speaking of information that might not be like the most important, we do find out when the Dark Ages are at a certain point in the movie.
The Nemeuse big backstory takes place in the
Dark Ages,
and I don't remember the specific date they give, but the Dark Ages are usually attributed to the 400s to the 500s, specifically, if you look it up online, 476.
476 AD. And so out of 476... Don't worry, gang. I know this is all your favorite part of the episode, but guess what? We like it the most, so you're going to deal with it. I'd give it an even 476. I'd give it like an even 213.
What letter grade is that to
F.
you? F. Wow!
I
disliked it that much.
I gave it, but it's not like a 10 out of 100. Sorry, now it's getting confusing. It's not like a full failure. Last night walking out of the theater, I gave it a D-. But the more I thought about it, I'm like,
you liked it even less.
I liked it less.
I also struggled with this movie, but I think I can admit I enjoyed it more. I would give it 300, which is a C-.
In your head.
In my head. Exactly. In my head.
To be clear.
In my head. So with that in mind, since we didn't enjoy it, what could the movie have done differently and for us would have made it awesome? Maybe not for everybody, but for us, it maybe would have improved some of the things that didn't work for us.
I'd say I couldn't tell if this was a reboot or a sequel. I couldn't tell.
It really could have functioned as both, and maybe they could have just done a soft sequel where it's like, but there's an event that happens and then that very much says, no, this is a reboot.
It is, yes.
Well, and also Ian McShane's character just being around.
So that's what I mean, where it's kind of both, because it almost treats it like you should know more, which you could. Well, a lot of people saw the first movie, not so much the second, I guess. Well, no, enough people saw the second one that they were going to make a third. But even that being said, I wish it just kind of picked a lane of like, what do you want to show us about this world? I like the idea that this movie kind of dives in. It's like the world's fantastical. People know about Hellboy, whatever. I wish it picked a lane of like, how far are you going to go into there? Kind of introduce us to what the world, how it views Hellboy and everything like that. and equating it back to Guillermo del Toro, I like that they kind of teased that it's like National Enquirer. It's like Bat Boy. That's what Hellboy is. He's something that like some people believe in, some people have caught, but even then we're like, it's so weird, man. Like, why would we believe that this is something that's running around?
Yeah.
So I wish it picked a lane with that, and also you could cut down on a lot of the. I like that he's got by the end of it, he's got a team of pretty fantastic people.
Yeah.
And I wish we cut back on them. Not that you don't have to do that, but you spent so much of the movie just trying to justify their existence in it, and while trying to justify all of Hellboy's backstory and future, and the villain, and the agency, and a very popular like fantasy tale that everyone knows that is somehow tied up, all wrapped up in this movie, in this big like rat's nest of a movie.
Yeah, you could have streamlined it.
Oh yeah, in a best way to say it is to streamline it.
Yeah, I think for me, something that would have made it more awesome for me is if you really, like we talked about before, that gonzo horror comedy, like Sam Raimi, Drag Me to Hell, Evil Dead 2, or Army of Darkness even more, because of the scale of that's much bigger. That kind of, because some of the stuff in this movie is so ridiculous, if you just let it be ridiculous in a way that lets the audience know you are in on the joke, and you're having fun with it, because there's parts of that, but there's other times where it feels like they're just throwing in jokes and they don't realize the setup they have is kind of insane.
It's like specifically ADR.
Yeah, a lot of ADR. And just the other thing is just edit. I know that's kind of deep into it for most people watching these movies don't like, the editing, but like you could have, the editing's pretty choppy and took me out of the experience more. It felt like there was a lot of hands in the pot on this one.
Yeah,
that's the phrase. All right. Anyway,
it makes sense. Yeah.
So, and I think on paper, like the original comic story is super interesting. On paper, a lot of the stuff that happens in this movie is interesting. Maybe you could cut out, because there's the cult society that Hellboy worked. There's BPRD, and then there's a whole other society we're introduced to. Maybe you could
and another one.
Yeah, later. You could have maybe chucked some of that. You know what I mean? Streamline it, like you said, and just really lean into that crazy out there tone. I think it would have been a great way to differentiate it from Guillermo del Toro's stuff and set off your own trail, and made it less harrowing.
And I think going into this movie, I will say I was able to kind of remove some of these thoughts. I'd say I'm pretty good going into movies if I'm kind of on the fence about them. I can kind of drop some of that and just watch the movie and enjoy as much as I can, unless it's not enjoyable like this was for me. I can usually take away stuff. What I'm trying to say is, going into this and seeing like the super R-rated stuff and like the violence and the blood and the guts, it felt like it felt silly to me.
If it was intentionally silly, that would have been fun.
That would have been fun.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that could have been what it was going into it. In the beginning of the movie, I was like, the violence is like, it's just to heighten the silliness of this, and that was fun. It doesn't become that as the movie goes on, which I felt whatever. I will say that the violence didn't really bother me the way I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
But I just wish this movie meant more overall. Like, it even brings up a point of view from Hellboy, which is interesting, but then it doesn't do anything.
There's one specific scene between Hellboy and Broom that I actually think really works. And it's also tough for me, because if you look at the Hellboy comic, I'm not the most versed in the Hellboy character, but if you look at the art of the comic, Mike Mignola's art is so distinct, and it's so hard to capture that in like a live action setting. It kind of makes me wish we would do like a stop motion animated something or something. You know what I mean? Like,
they get kind of some of that in Hellboy too. Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and again, it's tough because Guillermo del Toro has such a distinct vision, and he got to put his stamp on it first. This kind of feels like Batman Forever to Tim Burton's Batman, like kind of like, okay, we're doing this now. You know what I mean? Although to be fair, I did like Batman Forever as a kid. I really liked Batman Forever as a kid.
I liked both of those as a kid.
And I think going back to this movie, if you're a fan of the comics and are just excited to see live action versions of the stuff that you liked in the comic, this will deliver on that.
And if you guys are fans of more fantasy elements when it comes to like fairies or trolls or what have you, there are every piece of that is in here, and that part is really, I think that part's kind of cool. I just wish there was a clearer focus of where the movie wanted to go. It feels like it's just trying to like, hey gang, maybe someone behind the scenes was like, we might not get another one of these, so let's just kind of go for it. Let's go ham. And I wish it just kind of calmed down a little bit and got to either focus on the humor, or the violence, or it had one story. Is this about Hellboy specifically, or is it about this evil queen, witch, lady? Is it about or what it means to be a monster in a human world? Like what? Like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that it just kind of just stirs around and expects you to kind of like just try to pay attention to. Man, so the way this movie is pieced together, it's very confusing, and I just wish it was more streamlined. I've said that kind of a couple times.
Yeah.
That's it because the more I think about it, the more I start to dislike it, because there are so many like little like, hey, remember that this part happened, and it's confusing.
So those were our thoughts, but we'd like to know what your thoughts are in the comments. Also, if you have questions you'd like us to discuss about the movie, please put those in the comments as well, because we love to interact with you guys, specifically on our podcast, Only Stupid Answers, where we like to answer your questions, specifically sometimes on the videos we do here. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming down the pipe. If you liked our Thanos explainer, we've got another more video game centric explainer coming soon. We're also doing our Game of Thrones coverage. We've got, if you have not watched an episode of Game of Thrones and you're like, maybe the last season, to the best of our abilities, we made it as tight as possible. Around 20 minutes of speculation plus a little bit of fan theories that you might want to know going in.
And there's a lot more on our Patreon, patreon.com/onlystupid-answers. There's a link up there. There's a link over there at some point. Make sure you click that. And make sure you check out all of our other videos and stay in touch by hitting that bell notification, like button, and subscribe. We appreciate you guys. My name is Sam Basher at Sam Basher.
I'm at DJ Wooldridge at DJ Talks Trash, every place that matters.
And Might Be Social for all stuff Might Be Awesome. You can go check